Good morning, everybody. We're a little slow getting in today, a little sleepy. It's all good. So good to see you. If you are in the room with us, it's good to have you here. If you're joining us online, we are glad that you are joining us as well. A few announcements for you, and lots of QR codes. I went a little QR code crazy. You can see that in the announcement sheet. And they're all coming up on your screens here too. So the easiest way to remember all of the things that I'm about to say is to check out your Church Center app. If you don't have that, come find me or Chris a little bit later and we can help you get that set. But all of these events and things that are coming up are in your Church Center app. So you can find all the details there if you need to. And with all the QR codes as well. So a couple of things that are coming up real soon. Tonight, Branch Students resumes. You'll have your normal gathering here tonight at 6 o'clock from 6 to 7:30, and that's for any student in grades 6 through 12. So if you haven't been before, now's a great time to start. And then in 2 weeks, they're going to Cran Hill up north, just an hour drive north, for Winterfest. Ice skating, broom ball, food, lots of good, fun winter activities. So that's one of your QR codes. Students, we do need you to sign up for that so we know how many people are riding along. Families, you're welcome to go as well. This is not just a student event. This is a family thing. It's all free. You're welcome to go. But if your students are going with the Branch Students group, we do need to know that so we can figure out rides and cars and all of that, okay? And if you have questions, I'm sure you can talk to your leaders tonight about it, and they'll be more than happy to help you too. Another thing coming up this week, on Wednesday, we're going to have a training for how to run our sound system, how to run the computer. So if that's something that's interesting to you, would you let us know you're coming? There's a QR code for that. It's also in your Church Center app. This Wednesday from 6 to 8. You do not need to have like all the knowledge of all things AV. We will teach you what you need to know. But if that's something that is interesting to you and that's fun to you, we would love to start building up that team a little bit. So Brennan is running it today and doing a phenomenal job, but he would like some friends to help as well. Yeah? There's also a survey that we sent out for just volunteers in general for the branch. There's lots of ways to be involved. If you have been volunteering in some capacity for a long time, and maybe it's time to change, and maybe it's time to do something different, or maybe that's the thing you still want to do. Let us know on that survey. If you have never volunteered in the past before and there's something that you want to do, maybe it's not even listed on that survey, throw in a note in there as well, and we'll get you connected, all right? All right. Oh, one more thing. I'm full of fun things today. At least I think they're fun. We are looking at the calendar for this year, and February can be a time that, like, we kind of hibernate in Michigan, right? We go indoors. It's cold. It's gray. We don't feel like going anywhere, or maybe we don't have anything on the calendar. Well, we wanted to give an opportunity to connect with some other branch people. If you would like to share a meal with some other folks, we're calling it, we don't have a good name. You all have to come. I'm no good at this. So share 3 meals together over 5 weeks. So you'll decide when and where you can go out to eat. You can cook. You can do a combination of all of those things. But for 3 weeks, every other weekend, you'll share a meal together. Just for connection, for some laughter and fun and deepening of relationships or building new relationships. So if that's something that is interesting to you, use the QR code, or again, it's in your Church Center app, okay? QR codes like crazy today, friends, all over the place. If you have any questions about any of that, don't hesitate to come talk to me, talk to Chris, and we will make sure you know what you need to know. All right, let's take a minute to stand up and go say hello. Find somebody you don't know or somebody you haven't seen in a while and say hello. If you're online, you are welcome to say hello in the comments as well. We'd love to see where you are joining us from. And we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, friends, I'm going to invite you to find your seats again. And Heather is going to come up and lead us in a call to worship and light our Christ candle this morning.
Good morning. All right. Lord of creation, create in us a new rhythm of life, composed of hours that sustain rather than stress, of days that deliver rather than destroy, of time that tickles rather than tackles. To our packed full planners, we bid peace. To our over-caffeinated consciences, we say cease. To our suffocating selves, Lord, grant release. Drowning in a sea of deadlines and death chimes, we rest in you, our lifeline. By your ever-restful grace, allow us to enter your Sabbath rest as your Sabbath rest enters into us. In the name of our Creator, our Liberator, our resurrection and life, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Heather. Last week we started a series on Sabbath that will continue here in the next 6 or 7 weeks. It is this ancient practice that we learn about from the very first pages of Scripture, and a practice that is designed to bring life to us, to bring wholeness, right? But it's not an easy practice, especially when we are inundated with busyness and just so many things, right? So that's why we're taking. Now you can hear me. That was not very Sabbathy. Sorry. Yeah, that was a wake up. That's why we're taking this much time to talk about it, because it's not something that is normal to our society, for sure, to our lives. So I wanted to sing a song this morning that is a prayer that kind of reminds us that this is why God teaches us about these things, because God's ways bring life and bring wholeness to us. So if you would like to stand and sing, this is a song we haven't sung here at the branch before, but it is super simple and easy to catch on to. So I invite you to stand and sing, "Teach Us Your Ways." Teach us the ways of love, that you teach us the ways of rest, that you teach us the ways that bring wholeness and life. Amen. You can have a seat. If you are in preschool through grade 4 and you would like to go out to Branch Kids, Chris and Tara will meet you at the back. And parents, they will come back here at the end of worship, so you don't have to go downstairs to check them out. They will be back.
I'm not texting, I promise. I'm actually trying to connect to the computer back there so I can, do my slides and not have Brennan have to worry about that. But Brennan, you may end up having to help me. We'll see if things work here or not. Before I get into the message for this morning, let me say a bit of good news and then a brief reminder. About a month ago, we had our congregational meeting. This is an annual thing where we meet after worship in December, and we talk about our budget for the next calendar year. It's riveting. Actually, this year was quite interesting because we have a lot to talk about. And we shared then that we were probably projecting to be about $6,000 or $7,000 behind at the end of the year. And as it turns out, we ended up $250 behind budget. So we closed this really big gap that we didn't think we would, and that's worth celebrating, yes? It's certainly worth celebrating, yes. You can clap. It is okay to clap in church. Related to that, one of the things we also said at that gathering was that, this year holds a lot of question marks for us around a building. And if you're new here today, you don't have to worry about any of this. We're happy to share any and everything with you. But the short is we're trying to discern where we're going to meet in the long term, whether it's here or somewhere else. And that carries a lot of financial question marks as well. And so, we've said, hey, some of you have told us very explicitly, and some of you were thinking about it, that you might in this calendar year be able to give a little bit extra than what you did in the previous year. And I'm just saying to you, that's amazing if you're able to do that. Don't forget to do that. For us, we give regularly through our bank. I haven't touched that in a long time. I need to remember to go in and change that. And so here's a reminder, we need to go in and do that because we haven't done that yet. And we don't want to get too far into the year here and, start off behind, right? So if you said you could do that, reminder to do that. If you thought when we asked in a survey in November, hey, might you be able to give more, and you maybe said, I don't know, or I don't know that I will be able to, I want to just invite you to consider what even $5 a week might mean. If 20 households did $5 a week, it actually adds up quite a bit over the course of a year. And this is where the power of a collective community comes into play, where we're able to do a lot more together than we are on our own. So there's an invitation as well to you this morning. All right. So we're talking, as Teresa said, about Sabbath. And I'll just say right out of the gate, if you think that this is a series in which I'm trying to convince you to set aside 24 hours in which you do absolutely nothing, well, it kind of is that, but it's not really that, because the reality is that for most of us, if the takeaway from today was to go home and carve out a 24-hour period of time where you did no work, you probably wouldn't be able to do it. Not right out of the gate anyway, because our lives are just not set up to look anything like that anymore. And so I'm not saying that's not a worthy end goal, but what we're trying to have a conversation about is what does Sabbath teach us generally about the rhythms of our lives and the way that we see our lives, and how do we take that and begin to maybe implement it now in ways that we can, with the hope that it would grow perhaps over time. So today we're going to talk about a relationship between Sabbath and time. And I want to begin right away by inviting you to get into a little group. This is going to be a little kind of conversational and interactive here this morning, as it often is on Sundays for us. So all you need to do is find 2, 3, 4 people around you. We're not rearranging chairs. We do that sometimes. This is pretty quick little gather together, have a brief conversation, and then we'll come back apart. And here are the questions I want to invite you to just consider, Brennan, if you put up the next slide. What is time? Just a small question. What is time? How do we think about it? How do we talk about it? Okay? So how do we tend to think about time in our culture? And how do we talk about it? What words do we use? And what might that tell us about what we think time is? So just circle up This is just going to be 90 seconds, maybe a couple minutes. Find a few people to just have a conversation with. If you don't know each other, introduce each other to one another, and then I'll call us back together. Ready, set, go. If you're online, there's a QR code on the screen that Brendan's going to put up. This will take you to a Google Doc where you can share what you think about these questions, and we'll come back to this. So you're going to want to have this QR code ready and have it going. What is time? How do we talk about it? And what does it mean to us? Yeah. Anything along those lines. Yep. All right, a couple more seconds. That's me, Brendan. I think it's working again. Thanks. All right, so let's just share here a second. What arose? What came up in conversation to any of those questions? What just kind of shout it out here. I'm not going to go from group to group. So what did you talk about? What came up? Time is money. Anybody else have that? Oh, good. Well, stars for you. You had a unique answer. What else? What else? So time is often, we have a scarcity mindset around it. Yes, yes, yes. There's just never enough, right? Never enough. So don't waste it. Absolutely. Yeah. What's that? So we carry the idea that we can control time, right? Is that what you're saying, right? Am I hearing you correctly? Yep. That it's something that, is within our ability to shape. Mm-hmm. What else? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Where to go? Yeah, so Jeff was saying that time kind of has shifted for him as he's gotten older, and different events help us see time differently or think of time differently. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Mm. Mm. Yeah, there's, again, never enough of it, so it's scarcity. I didn't use it effectively. Right there, I used my time well today. Yeah. Yeah. So last week I shared this framework. Thank you for all of that. We're going to go into those groups near the end to have one more conversation. But I shared this framework that we're going to use every week as we talk about Sabbath. That there's a default orientation that we have, and today we're talking about time. So I'm going to suggest to you, and you've already spoken to it, that there's a default orientation about the way that we think about time. Sabbath disorients us and reorients us. So Sabbath kind of comes in and it disrupts this default orientation, and it potentially reorients us. So what is our default orientation around time? Again, many of you have said something about this already. And one maybe bit of language to use around it is to think of time as a commodity to maximize. I mean, we live in this capitalistic culture. I mean, through and through, capitalism is what we eat, breathe, drink every day. And so it's not surprising that time would become a commodity in the economic kind of engine of this world that we live in, right? And we have to maximize it. Some of you spoke to that. That's probably default, and then here's your gold stars, this group over here, yeah, time. So to a point, or to put it pointedly, time is money. Think about the way that we talk about time. Some of you use some of this language. We spend time. That's economic language. We save time. We borrow time. We can't afford the time. We've run out of time. We don't want to waste time. All of these are economic terms about the way that we talk about this thing called time. And so, not surprisingly, if the default orientation is to think of time as a commodity or an object that we have to maximize, well, then we try to maximize it, and we try to manage our time like crazy, do we not? Time management is almost its own separate kind of industry, how to help you effectively manage your time so that you get the most out of it. And I think that what this ends up creating is this idea that time must always be productive. It just has to be, right? I don't even think that we think of a different option. It's just the default, again, that time has to be productive, every moment of it. And so we feel like we can never stop. And I think as a result, we struggle to be present. We're always so scattered thinking about what's next, or maybe thinking about what we didn't get done. And it's really, really hard when your default is to think of time as something to maximize and be productive with. It's really hard, I think, to be present in this moment, because you're always elsewhere trying to figure out how to maximize that time. So as I said a moment ago, though, Sabbath comes in and it disorients us. It disrupts the status quo. And here is the beginning of a passage from Exodus 20. And Exodus 20 is where we find the 10 commandments, the top 10. Remember when Letterman did the top 10, right? Like the most important things that God wants to communicate to Israel. Number 4, not necessarily, well, maybe in order of importance. I'm not sure that that's the way the 10 commandments are set up, though. But the 4th one is all about the Sabbath, and it starts this way. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. So this commandment is clear. I think this is important to just say, that God desires for us to work. Work is good. Being productive is good. Now, productive to what ends? That's a question probably worth thinking carefully about, and we're going to in the coming weeks. But God's not like, hey, who cares what you do with your time? Nor is God like, hey, work is bad, you shouldn't work hard, or you shouldn't be productive. That also is not the message of the Scriptures. But this passage does continue. But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. And this includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the 7th day God rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So again, God says, hey, yeah, for 6 days work. But if every moment, if every day, every week, every year is spent trying to maximize your time, trying to squeeze every ounce out of every second to the ends of being efficient and productive, well, then you will be out of rhythm. And there will almost certainly be a cost. I think we all feel that, know that. Anybody have this experience? Do you travel the same route home in your car, or to and from a location? You just do it maybe every day or even a couple times a day, to and from work or school, who knows, the store, right? We travel a route so often that we don't have to think about it. And have you ever had it happen where you leave a certain place and the next thing you know, you're pulling into your driveway and you're like, I don't remember anything about that drive home, you know? I've had that happen pretty recently. And it's both alarming and very curious to me. Well, how does that happen? Well, I can be on autopilot because I've traveled this path so many times. I think that the orientation of thinking that time is money, or that time is a commodity, or that time must always be productive, I think that is like a route that we travel over and over, day after day, week after week, year after year. And before long, or at some point, it becomes a route so well traveled, we don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just the default. And a year might pass, 5 years might pass before all of a sudden something kind of snaps you awake and makes you realize, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about time in a certain way and I didn't even realize it because it's just the default. So Sabbath is meant to be that thing that disrupts us, that kind of shakes us awake. The car that's stopping quickly while you're driving home from work, and that makes you go, oh my gosh, I wasn't even paying attention. Sabbath is meant to wake us up and help us see things differently. It's meant to disorient and reorient us. So back to Exodus 20 here. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day God rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So God creates this pattern that provides ample time for work and productivity. 6 out of 7 days, I don't know what the percentage of that is, but it's pretty high. It's pretty high. There's a lot of time to work and be productive, but to spend every day, every waking moment, trying to get the most out of our time because it's a commodity that we must maximize, that will leave us simply worn out and tired. And so God says to us, you have to have a rhythm of Sabbath that helps remind you that time is not a commodity to get the most out of. Time, all of time, is a gift of love. It is a gift of love to be received and a gift of love to be given away. I think this is a very different way to think of time. Would you not agree? To think of time as a commodity, an object to maximize, versus time as love. Those are very different ways of seeing the same thing. But I think this is what Sabbath does. I think it's meant to teach us to receive God's gift of time, of love to us. Because what God says to us on the Sabbath is, hey, here's a day where I don't want you to worry about producing. This is a day where productivity is not the end goal. You don't have to prove yourself in this space of Sabbath. Just come. Just enter into this time. Simply receive it. Enjoy it. Celebrate it. Experience it fully. Not like the crazy person you are during the week who's running around chasing every second. Just come into this space and receive this gift. Janelle gave me the book called Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. Heschel is a Jew who lived in the first half of the 20th century. He's a mystic, he's a poet, he's prophetic. He's quite something, really. And he has this book on the Sabbath, of course, as the title would indicate. And let me just read this one sentence in which he's talking about what the Sabbath is meant to do. There's a realm of time, he's talking about Sabbath, where the goal is not to have, but to be. Not to own, but to give. Not to control, but to share. Not to subdue, but to be in accord. That is what Sabbath invites us into. All of those things, he says, require a receptivity, not a productivity, a receptivity. And if you can learn during your rhythm of Sabbath to receive the gift of time as a gift of love, then it will reorient you so that you can see time that way every day. It's a mistake, I think, to think that Sabbath is just this one day where everything's kind of different, and then the other 6 days we do whatever we want, or it doesn't matter really. What Sabbath is meant to do is it's meant to reorient us for all of the days of the week. It's meant to help us see clearly every day, every moment. And so ultimately, that would be the hope, that we wouldn't just enter Sabbath and see time as a gift, but we would enter it every day and see it that way. And then we would share that gift with each other. I kind of mentioned this a moment ago, but I think one of the great casualties of seeing time as a commodity is that we are not present to each other very often. We're always running from one thing to the next. We're always on. We're on our phones, responding right away or hoping we don't miss something important. And I think a consequence for trying to maximize every moment is that we are decreasingly present to each other because we're always somewhere else. And to put it simply, I think love requires presence. It's very hard to love unless you are in the moment with the person that you are with. I want to play for you a brief portion of this podcast. And if you, I'll put the QR code up here in just a moment when we break into groups. If you follow that link, you'll get to this. I have some links to this podcast, or you can just, of course, find it. The Ezra Klein Show. A couple weeks ago, he interviewed a Jewish author and journalist who wrote a book on Sabbath. Ezra is a Jew, although secular, but he's very curious about this thing of Sabbath because he feels the fatigue. He's witnessed and experienced the fatigue of chasing every second. So they have this really lovely conversation. It's about an hour long, kind of goes all over the place. I'm going to play about a 3-minute section, and I just invite you to listen. What you're going to hear is his guest sharing with you this experiment that was done in the 1970s about time and how we view the way in which we view time changes how we see each other. That's enough of an intro. Brandon, would you hit the play button for me?
You also have a very, very interesting section in the book where you talk about the way different structures of time act upon our own morality and what we're able to see. Can you tell me a bit about the Good Samaritan experiment?
So in 1973, 2 social psychologists wanted to answer the question, what makes someone stop when passing by, a stranger who is in obvious distress, let's just say on the street? They wanted to know which of 3 attributes would make them stop. Innate personality, cultural conditioning or how they were raised, or something more situational. And they went to Princeton Theological Seminary because they wanted to work with people who were familiar with a parable from the Gospels in which Jesus tells the story. Someone is lying on the ground, is in obvious distress. Different kinds of people go by. Finally, the Good Samaritan stops and helps the man up, gives him food to eat, water to drink, takes him to shelter. So they took these students and they wanted to reawaken the story of the Good Samaritan in their heads, and they asked some of them to write a sermon about it, and they asked some of them to write an essay on their job prospects, and then they sent them over to another building to give a sermon. And they divided the students in third, and they told 1/3 of the students to get to the building really fast because they were late. They told 1/3 of the students that they weren't late, but they better not dawdle. And they told 1/3 of the students that they had plenty of time to get to the building. And along the way, as they were going to the building, they passed someone slumped against a wall in very obvious distress. And they wanted to know who would stop. And what they found is the people who would stop were the ones who had plenty of time. Some of the ones who were on time but shouldn't dawdle did stop, some didn't. The ones who were in a rush did not stop. And they concluded that it wasn't a factor of personality. It wasn't a factor of cultural conditioning, right? It wasn't that they knew the Good Samaritan story. It was the situation they found themselves in, how fast they felt they had to go. And they came to the conclusion that ethics becomes a luxury, this is a quote, ethics becomes a luxury as the speed of our daily life increases. They also found that some of the students hadn't even seen the guy. They just hadn't even noticed that he was there. And their conclusion, it's just a line I really like. Time quickening narrows the cognitive map, meaning that your ability to perceive things sort of shuts down because you're so focused on getting done what you have to get done by the deadline.
I found that's
I'd invite you to listen to the rest of it. It's good, and they go on to talk about some interesting things around that particular experiment. But did you follow along what's happening? They're trying to figure out what will make a group of people, a person, stop and love another person in distress. Is it, that they know the story of the Good Samaritan? No, all of them knew the story, Is it cultural conditioning somehow? Is it their upbringing? Is it their personality? Maybe some people are more inclined to do it than others. No. It's time. It's time. And how it's being viewed in that moment. Klein goes on to say that it's not only his inability to care for other people that's diminished, but his ability to care for himself is diminished when he is constantly trying to run from thing to thing. It seems, easily don't see each other when time is a commodity. And Sabbath teaches us to put away whatever might normally demand our time, to have a rhythm where the distractions are set aside so that we can be present to each other. In the Jewish understanding of Sabbath, Shabbat, it begins every Friday evening at sunset with a meal with the people you love. And at the start of a Shabbat, everything's been done already. The food's already been prepared. Everything's been put away. There's no more work to be done. The only thing to do is to sit around a table and be. It's a helpful practice, I think. And so here's a question I want to invite you to ask each other as you're kind of breaking up into your groups again. And I don't have it on the screen, so you're smart enough, you can remember it. It is in the QR. It's in that Google Doc. If you need to go back there, if you're online, we'd love to have you share your thoughts there. Here's that QR code. What's the difference between a person, do you think, who sees time as a gift of love and a person who sees time as a commodity? What are the differences between those two people? What would you notice about them? What have you noticed about yourself when you've been in one place or the other? How would you describe those two types of people? All right? So let's take a couple minutes, circle up again in those same groups, and just have a conversation about that. What's the difference, do you think, between those two types of people? Ready, set, go. So this is good. Let's kind of circle back up here. Yeah. I appreciate whoever's sharing something online right now. I'm tracking with you, and that is good stuff. Yeah. So, anything kind of come up? Anything that you just want to notice or share? I did hear you talking, so I know you said some things. Maybe you talked about the football games this afternoon or something, but yeah. Mm. 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 Right, right. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I won't repeat everything that he said for those of you online, but Jeff is comparing the experience of his two sets of grandparents and how they both died and what that has taught him about maybe how they both saw time and how he wants to see time. Thanks, Jeff. What else? Hmm. Mm. Yeah, 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 right. Kevin is saying that short periods of time, when done with quality, I'll use your word there, is we shouldn't shortchange the meaning of that or the impact of those periods of time. And again, as I said at the beginning, we are talking about this thing called Sabbath, which in the scriptures is a 24-hour period, and it can feel really overwhelming. So maybe you're bringing a little bit of balance here, helping us to encourage to think about the fact that even short periods of time done well really matter. Really matter. Anybody else? Yeah. Ooh. Life isn't measured by the breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away. Yeah, yeah, kind of getting at that same idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Mm. Yes, right. Mm. Interesting. Gonna get in trouble, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Thanks, Elizabeth. Her and Jeff were talking about being teachers and the challenge of how every minute is scripted or it has to be focused on getting something done. And so there's the opportunity to love a student in distress, but you can't because you have to. Trisha's last name again? Hershey. This is the Nat Bishop. Yeah, right? You can follow her on social media. And she writes constantly about rest, naps, a form of rest, as a form of resistance, and is, as a black woman, is regularly calling us back to the reality that this belief that we always have to be productive is wrapped up in, yes, capitalism, but capitalism is in bed with white supremacy, right? And so it's I always have to be working. It flows out of a culture that is built on white supremacy. And so resting is a form of actual resistance to that. It's interesting. Yeah, thanks for raising that. Yeah, you can follow her, and she will challenge you, I imagine, and encourage you to take a nap. So it's not all bad, folks. I'm just saying. But yeah, good. Okay. So what I want to do here is leave a little bit of room for some reflection, because Sabbath is a practice. It's not like a heady intellectual idea only. In fact, I would say primarily it's not. It is primarily a practice. So I want to give some space here for you to think about what it would look like to practice Sabbath, to think of time differently, not as a commodity, but as a gift of love that you both receive and give away. And so I have a couple of ideas just to get you started, and you can take these and run with them. We're going to have 5 or 7 minutes here to just stay where you're at and again, reflect however you'd like, or head in a different direction, whatever direction would be most meaningful to you. But maybe this is fairly obvious, but I'm going to ask you, here's a couple questions you could consider. What would it be like for you to be more present this week generally, and is there someone specifically who you need to be more present to, and what would it look like to be more present to them? So you could easily spend the next 5-7 minutes on those two questions. I imagine we all could, but I give that as an option. What does it actually look like to be more present? If you do listen to that podcast right after the section we listened to, you'll hear them talk about, and then they talk about it again, I think later on, about the role of technology in all of this. I don't know how we don't talk about technology as we're trying to have this conversation about rest. And so again, I just offer this. These are not the only things you could do. It's interesting that the makers of technology are now specifically creating tools to encourage us to not be on their technology. I mean, recently, both Apple and Android have created Focus, or digital wellness, I think is what Android calls it. That's where you find it in their menu. Isn't that fascinating? So here are links. I think these are both to articles, depending on your operating system, that'll tell you how to access these menus. Like, what would it be like you can create in both Android and Apple your own, you can name and create these little subcategories. So like, I just went in there, was playing around, and I created one called Sunday. And what if on Sunday, certain apps were not on my phone, just at all? I try to limit some stuff, but I'm terrible at it, and so what if it's just not there? What if there's only certain people? You can choose certain people that can only kind of get notifications to you on that day. What would it be like to set something up? And maybe it's not Sunday. Maybe it's a different day of the week. Maybe it's only a couple of hours on a day. Again, we have to take whatever step we can take, and some of us might be able to do whatever. So here's a couple of options. 5 to 7 minutes, you could kind of track this down and explore this. You could just be thoughtful and reflective about what it would be like to be more present this week, and maybe identify a specific step that you would take. Maybe it's something else to think about. Let me also offer during these 5 to 7 minutes the opportunity to share in this meal, to simply come up to this table. No one will be here serving it this week, although we always believe that Christ is here with us, serving us. So you can simply come up and take a piece of bread or a gluten-free cracker and a cup and take them back to your seat and eat and drink them on your own being mindful of this gift of life and care that God gives to us, this gift that restores us if we're tired. It gives us strength if we're weak, gives us hope if we're scared. And so we can share in this meal in this time too. So let me invite you, however you'd like, to engage this conversation. Have a conversation with people around you. You got a younger kid or an older kid? Talk with them about what this means to them. Let's take some time here. I'll draw us back in about 5 minutes. Ready, set, go. to find some ways to practice this in our lives, to integrate it into our lives, and it could look so many different ways. That's wonderful. It's probably also partly the challenge. So we'll take and try and hold on to that as we go into the week. Before we do, we're going to sing one more song that really invites us, I think, to receive and to give away this gift of love and of time. And then we'll have a blessing and be on our way. All right.
I invite you to stand and sing with me, but if you would like to sit and just listen and receive as Sabbath practice for you today, that is absolutely you're more than welcome to do that as well this morning. Whatever is most meaningful for you to receive love and to help you be grounded in love and rooted in love rather than time. Whatever works for you this morning, we invite you into that posture. I lift my eyes up to the hills, this my morning song, where my strength comes from. I lift my eyes up to the hills, this my evening song, where my help comes from. This is the gravity of love, just as the moon follows the sun. You're all around me, you're holding everything. This is the hope of every land, just as the universe expands. Your love is reaching, you're holding everything. We lift our eyes up to the hills. When will our help come? Lord, we cry, how long? We lift our eyes up to the hills. Even as we run, hope is chasing us. This is the gravity of love, just as the moon follows the sun. You're all around me, you're holding everything. This is the hope of every land, just as the universe expands. Your love is reaching, you're holding everything. This is the gravity of love, just as the moon follows the sun. You're all around me, you're holding everything. This is the hope of every land, just as the universe expands. Your love is reaching, you're holding everything.
The gift and grace of God is always reaching, you know. And time actually becomes one way that we can be mindful of that. If we can see time as a gift, then love is all around. And it's with us in every moment. So let's try and take that with us this week. We're going to offer this blessing to each other here in just a moment. Let me also just say I'm mindful that there's a lot of people in the Branch community that are sick this week. Some COVID stuff, some not COVID stuff. And if you are watching, I know some of you are online today, we know that we love you and we miss you, and we hope you are better soon. Here we go, right? We're into this gray season where sickness also seems to kind of come on strong. So may you be healthy this week as well. But we're going to speak this word to each other today. It's a couple slides. It's a blessing as we go into this world. So if you would, say this out loud. Lord of creation, create in
Us a new rhythm of life, composed of hours that sustain rather than stress, of days that deliver rather than destroy. By your ever restful grace, allow us to enter into your Sabbath rest, as your Sabbath rest enters into us. In peace.
Go in peace, friends. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.